A Hollywood legend sits in a corner booth of his own restaurant wearing faded jeans and a trucker cap, pulled low over his eyes. His famous long hair is tucked beneath the hat. 3 days of stubble cover his jaw. Nobody recognizes him. Nobody even glances his way. But what he witnesses in the next 72 hours will shatter everything he thought he knew about his own business. A young woman who sacrificed her medical career to save her dying mother gets robbed of her tips every single day. A widow working double shifts never sees her earnings. A former prisoner trying to rebuild his life gets threatened by his own manager. And when a cruel word about his disabled daughter reaches his ears, not a single person in that restaurant will ever forget what happens next. This is not a movie. This is real life. The memory came to Keanu Reeves unbidden, as it always did when he drove past a certain stretch of highway in Los Angeles. He was 30, 2 years old again, sitting in a small diner booth across from his younger sister Kim. She was 23, her head wrapped in a colorful scarf that hid the baldness caused by chemotherapy. Her cheeks were hollow, her skin pale as winter snow, but her eyes still sparkled with that mischievous light he had loved since childhood. "The pancakes here are terrible," Kim whispered conspiratorially, leaning across the table. But the waitress makes up for it. As if summoned by those words, Rose Patterson appeared at their table. She was in her 50s, with silver, streaked hair pulled back in a loose bun and laugh lines around her kind blue eyes. Unlike the other staff who averted their gaze from Kim's obvious illness, Rose looked directly at her with genuine warmth and affection. "Well, if it isn't my favorite customer," Rose said, setting down 2 cups of steaming coffee. "Kim, honey, that scarf brings out your beautiful eyes. Where did you find it?" "My brother bought it for me in Morocco," Kim replied, touching the silk fabric self-consciously. "He thinks accessories can distract from the whole dying of cancer situation." Rose laughed, a warm, rich sound that seemed to fill the entire diner and chase away the shadows. "Sweetheart, you could wear a potato sack and still be the prettiest girl in this place." She patted Kim's thin hand gently. "Now, what can I get you 2 troublemakers today?" That was Rose's magic. She never treated Kim like a patient, never offered pitying glances or uncomfortable silences, never lowered her voice to that hushed tone people used around the sick. She treated her like a person, whole and worthy and vibrantly alive. Every Tuesday for 8 months, Keanu brought his sister to that diner. Rain or shine, good days and bad days. Even when Kim was too weak to eat, she insisted on coming, just to see Rose. "She makes me feel normal," Kim explained once, when Keanu asked why this place mattered so much. "Everyone else looks at me like I'm already gone. Rose looks at me like I'm still here." Until one Tuesday when Kim was too weak to leave the hospital. Her body was failing. The cancer had spread to her bones, her liver, her lungs. The doctors said it was a matter of days. Keanu sat beside her bed for 72 hours straight, holding her hand, telling her stories about their childhood, about the future he still hoped they might share. And then, one Wednesday morning, as the first light of dawn crept through the hospital window, Kim stopped breathing altogether. She was 23 years old. Keanu still remembered standing outside the diner 2 weeks after the funeral, unable to bring himself to enter. The neon sign flickered in the evening rain. The windows were fogged with warmth from inside. Everything looked exactly the same as it had on 100 Tuesday visits. But nothing would ever be the same again. Rose had found him there, tears streaming down his face, his shoulders shaking with sobs he could not control. She did not say anything. She simply wrapped her arms around him and held him while he fell apart. "She talked about you constantly," Keanu managed to say when he could finally speak. "You made her feel normal when nothing else could, when no one else would." Rose had pulled back, her own eyes glistening in the streetlight. "Your sister taught me something important, something I try to remember every single day. Every person who walks through that door is fighting a battle we cannot see. The least we can do, the very least, is treat them with kindness. Kim's last words to Keanu echoed in his mind even now, 20 years later. Her voice had been barely a whisper, her grip on his hand almost non-existent. But her eyes had been clear and certain. Promise me something, big brother. Create more places like Rose's Diner. Places where people like me can feel human. Where the sick aren't invisible. Where the struggling aren't forgotten. Promise me? I promise, he had whispered back, and her hand had relaxed, and her eyes had closed, and she was gone. He had kept that promise. Kim's Kitchen began as a single restaurant purchased from Rose Patterson when she retired 8 years ago. The building had been falling apart, the equipment ancient, the neighborhood rough. But Keanu had seen something there that money could not create. He saw his sister's memory. He saw Rose's legacy. He saw a chance to do something meaningful with the fortune Hollywood had given him. Now Kim's Kitchen was a chain of 47 locations across the country. Each one built on the foundation of his sister's simple wish. Every person deserves dignity. Every customer deserves compassion. Every employee deserves respect. The company had a formal second chance program that hired former prisoners trying to rebuild their lives. They offered scholarships to employees pursuing education. They provided healthcare benefits that exceeded industry standards. They paid wages that allowed people to actually live, not just survive. At least, that was how it was supposed to work. But lately, something had been troubling Keanu about the Austin location. The financial reports showed steady profit. Revenue was up. Customer traffic remained strong. The regional manager, a man named Gary Patterson who happened to be Rose's nephew, had nothing but praise for the operation. Vince runs a tight ship, Gary assured him during their last quarterly call. Everything is under control. Vincent Hartley, the manager who always had perfect reports and convenient explanations. Keanu had promoted him 18 months ago based on impressive numbers at a smaller location. Now Vince managed one of the chain's highest volume restaurants. Yet the employee turnover rate was nearly 4 times higher than other locations. Customer reviews mentioned tension among staff. Anonymous complaints had reached corporate about unfair treatment, stolen tips, and a hostile work environment. Just disgruntled former employees? Gary had dismissed. You know how it is. Some people can't handle high standards. But Keanu knew the difference between high standards and abuse. He had seen that difference in his years in Hollywood. And his instincts told him something was very wrong at Kim's Kitchen, number 23. But there was another reason for this trip to Austin. Another person who needed him. Another heart he was desperate to reach. In the passenger seat of his rented pickup truck sat Lily Thompson, 8 years old, her wheelchair folded carefully in the back. She stared out the window with empty eyes, her small hands folded motionless in her lap, her silence a fortress that no therapist had been able to breach. 14 months ago, Lily's parents had been Keanu's closest friends. Michael Thompson was a stuntman who had worked with Keanu on 6 films over 15 years. He was the kind of man who would give you the shirt off his back, then apologize that it wasn't freshly ironed. His wife, Sarah, was a kindergarten teacher with a laugh that could fill any room and a heart that could hold the whole world. Together they had created Lily, a bright, curious, fearless child who called Keanu Uncle Key and demanded piggyback rides every time he visited, who asked impossible questions about the universe and accepted impossible answers with delighted wonder, who had once told him, with the absolute certainty of a 6-year-old, that she was going to be an astronaut veterinarian who lived on the moon. Then came the accident. A drunk driver running a red light at 60 miles per hour. Michael died on impact, his body shielding Sarah from the worst of the collision. It was not enough. Sarah passed in the ambulance, her last words a desperate plea to the paramedics to save her daughter. Lily survived, but survival and living were not the same thing. The crash had damaged her spine, leaving her in a wheelchair with uncertain prospects for recovery. Neurological complications affected her right side, making fine motor control difficult. Her hand trembled when she tried to hold a pencil. Her leg muscles had atrophied from months of disuse. But the physical injuries were almost secondary. The real damage was invisible. In the weeks after the accident, Lily had retreated into silence. She spoke only when absolutely necessary, and then only to Keanu. She did not cry. She did not laugh. She did not ask questions about astronauts or animals or anything at all. She simply existed. A ghost of the vibrant child she had been. In his will, Michael had named Keanu as Lily's guardian. The document had been written years earlier, back when such things seemed purely theoretical, back when death was something that happened to other people, in other stories, far away from their charmed lives. "You're the only one I trust to raise her right," Michael had written. "You understand loss. You'll know how to help her through it, and she already loves you like family." Keanu had accepted without hesitation. He had sold his house in Los Angeles and bought a smaller place with wheelchair accessibility. He had learned to cook Lily's favorite meals. He had read every book on childhood trauma he could find. He had hired the best therapists, the most innovative physical rehabilitation specialists, the most patient and understanding teachers. 14 months of trying. 14 months of gentle persistence. 14 months of one-sided conversations and unanswered questions, and a little girl who looked at him with eyes that held nothing but emptiness. The wall remained, and Keanu was running out of ways to reach her. "We're almost there, sweetheart," he said gently, glancing at Lily in the rearview mirror. She did not respond. She never did. The pickup truck pulled into the parking lot of Kim's Kitchen number 23 just as the dinner rush began. Keanu had dressed carefully for this visit. Faded blue jeans with wear at the knees. A red and black plaid flannel shirt unbuttoned over a plain gray t-shirt. Worn brown leatherwork boots that had seen years of use. And a dark blue trucker cap pulled low over his forehead to hide his famous features. His long dark brown hair was tucked completely beneath the cap. 3 days of stubble covered his jaw, adding to the working-class disguise. No one would recognize him like this. That was precisely the point. He stepped out of the truck and moved to help Lily into her wheelchair. She flinched slightly at his touch, as she always did, before going still and allowing him to lift her into the chair. The physical therapist said her motor control was improving. The doctors said her spine was healing better than expected. Everyone said she might walk again someday, with enough work and enough time. But no one could tell him when she might smile again. Inside the restaurant, the hostess barely glanced at them. She was young, maybe 19 or 20, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a bored expression that suggested she would rather be anywhere else. Her name tag read, Brittany, and her uniform was pristine, but her attitude was anything but professional. "Two?" she asked without looking up from her phone. "Yes," Keanu replied in a slightly gruff voice, adding a hint of Texas drawl for authenticity. Brittany finally raised her eyes, and something flickered across her face when she noticed Lily's wheelchair. Discomfort. Inconvenience. "We're pretty full right now," she said, her voice taking on that particular tone people used when they wanted you to go away. "It might be a while for a table that can accommodate." She gestured vaguely toward Lily, as if the wheelchair were some kind of contagious disease. Keanu felt his jaw tighten beneath his stubble. "We can wait." Brittany shrugged and returned to her phone, thumbs flying across the screen as she typed what was undoubtedly a very important text message. They waited 23 minutes. During that time, Keanu watched as 5 other parties arrived and were seated immediately. A couple who came in 10 minutes after them. A family of 4 who arrived 12 minutes later. A group of young professionals who showed up 15 minutes behind them and were led to a prime booth by the windows. Each time, Brittany looked past Keanu and Lily as if they were invisible. Each time, the wheelchair went unacknowledged. Each time, Keanu's anger grew a little hotter. Lily sat motionless beside him, her eyes fixed on the floor. Whether she noticed the discrimination or simply did not care anymore, Keanu could not tell. Both possibilities broke his heart. Finally, after 23 minutes of watching others receive the service they were denied, Brittany approached with a laminated menu in her hand. "Follow me," she said flatly. She led them to a small booth near the kitchen entrance, the least desirable location in the entire restaurant. The constant swinging of the kitchen door created a draft. The clatter of dishes and shouts of cooks made conversation difficult. The traffic of servers rushing past made the space feel cramped and chaotic. Brittany dropped two menus on the table without a word and disappeared before Keanu could respond. From his seat, Keanu had a perfect view of the main dining area, and what he saw made his blood pressure rise. Three servers worked the floor. Two of them moved with the leisurely pace of people who had never worried about earning their keep. Brittany had abandoned the hostess station to take tables, chatting with customers in the premium sections while checking her phone between orders. A young man whose name tag read Derek worked alongside her, his movements lazy, his attention divided between his tables and whatever was on his screen. They handled perhaps 4 tables each. The third server was a different story altogether. She moved with practiced efficiency that reminded Keanu immediately of Rose Patterson, carrying multiple plates balanced expertly along her arms, refilling coffee cups without being asked, smiling at customers despite obvious exhaustion that showed in every line of her body. Her name tag read Grace, and she was handling at least 12 tables by herself. Her uniform was clean but visibly worn, the embroidered Kim's Kitchen logo slightly frayed at the edges. The fabric had been washed so many times it had faded from royal blue to something closer to gray. Her shoes, Keanu noticed, were held together with what appeared to be duct tape on one sole. Dark circles hid beneath carefully applied concealer that could not quite do its job. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail that had started the shift neat and was now escaping in wisps around her face. She was perhaps 27 years old, and she looked like someone who had not slept properly in months. But her eyes, despite everything, still managed to convey warmth when she looked at customers, still managed to find genuine smiles for tired parents and fussy children and demanding business people who treated her like furniture. Something about her spoke of battles fought in silence, of strength hidden beneath exhaustion, of a spirit that refused to break, no matter how hard the world tried. After several minutes, Grace approached their table, slightly breathless but composed. "Good evening, and welcome to Kim's Kitchen. I'm Grace, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Her voice was warm despite her obvious fatigue. "I apologize for the wait. We're a bit short, staffed this evening." The apology was unnecessary. Keanu had seen exactly why they had waited so long. But before he could respond, Grace did something that stopped him cold. She bent down, lowering herself to be at eye level with Lily in her wheelchair. Not talking down to her, not talking over her to Keanu, speaking directly to the child, as one person to another. "And what's your name, sweetheart?" Lily did not look up. Her eyes remained fixed on her folded hands. Keanu's heart sank, preparing for the awkward silence that always followed. The moment when strangers realized Lily was not going to respond. The uncomfortable shuffling and throat, clearing and eventual retreat to addressing only Keanu. But Grace did not retreat. She simply smiled, as if the silence were perfectly natural and completely acceptable. "That's a beautiful necklace you're wearing," she said softly. "Is that a butterfly?" Lily's hand moved almost involuntarily to the silver pendant around her neck. It had been Sarah's, one of the few possessions Lily had asked to keep from her mother's belongings. She wore it every single day, tucked beneath her shirt where no one could see it, pressed against her heart where she could feel it. Still, she said nothing. Grace nodded thoughtfully. Butterflies are my favorite too. You know, they're magical creatures. They start out as caterpillars, crawling on the ground, stuck in one place, unable to fly. But then something amazing happens. She paused. Lily's eyes flickered upward for just a moment. They go into their cocoon. Grace continued, her voice gentle and unhurried. And everyone thinks nothing is happening. It looks like they're just sleeping, just waiting. But inside, everything is changing. They're becoming something new, something beautiful. Another pause. And then one day they emerge. And they can fly. They can go anywhere they want. They can touch the sky. Grace smiled. Pretty amazing what can happen when we give things time. For the briefest moment, Lily's eyes met Grace's. Really met them. Then down again. But Keanu had seen it. A crack in the wall. The first crack in 14 months. Can I get you both something to drink while you look at the menu? Grace asked, addressing Keanu, but keeping her body angled toward Lily, still including her in the conversation. Coffee for me, black as midnight. And Keanu looked at Lily, hope rising in his chest. Lily, what would you like? Silence. Grace did not sigh, did not shift impatiently, did not look to Keanu for help. Instead, she knelt beside the wheelchair, bringing herself even lower than Lily's eye level. A deliberate choice that showed remarkable intuition about how to make a child feel safe. We have strawberry lemonade with real strawberries floating in it, she said softly, as if sharing a wonderful secret. And I can put a bendy straw in it so it's easier to drink. Would you like that? A long, heavy pause. Keanu held his breath. Then, almost imperceptibly, Lily nodded. Keanu felt tears prick at his eyes. Grace's smile was radiant. Excellent choice. That's my favorite, too. I'll be right back. As she walked away, Keanu stared at his daughter. That was more response than Lily had given anyone outside of their home in 14 months. More engagement. More presence. More life. What had just happened? Through the kitchen window, Keanu glimpsed a man in his mid-40s watching the floor with cold, calculating eyes. Vincent Hartley. He was leaner than in his corporate headshot, with sharp features that seemed designed for cruelty and dark hair slicked back with too much product. He stood with arms crossed, observing his domain like a predator surveying a field of prey, deciding which creature to hunt next. When Grace passed near him on her way to the kitchen, Keanu noticed how her shoulders tensed, how her steps quickened, how her eyes stayed fixed straight ahead. The body language of someone avoiding a threat. Over the next 2 hours, Keanu observed everything. He watched Derek and Brittany handle their small sections with minimal effort while Grace ran herself ragged covering twice as many tables. He watched customers at Grace's tables pay with credit cards, only for Derek to materialize and take over the transaction before Grace could process it herself. He watched cash payments go into a register that only Derek and Vince seemed to access. He watched patterns emerge. Ugly patterns. Familiar patterns. The patterns of exploitation he had seen in Hollywood. The patterns of powerful people taking advantage of those with no power to fight back. Around 7:30, an older woman emerged from the back of the restaurant, tying a worn apron around her waist. She was in her mid-50s, with gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and tired eyes that still managed to hold warmth. Her name tag read, Martha, and everything about her body language screamed exhaustion. But she smiled at customers anyway. She refilled coffee without being asked. She moved with the efficiency of someone who had spent decades in service and took pride in doing her job well. And just like Grace, she was assigned to the worst section of the restaurant. Just like Grace, she worked twice as hard as Derek and Brittany. Just like Grace, she seemed to shrink whenever Vince looked her way. Around 8 o'clock, a young Hispanic man in a busboy uniform caught Keanu's attention. His name tag read, Tommy, and he moved through the restaurant with his head down and his shoulders hunched. Every few minutes, his eyes would dart toward Vince's office, checking, monitoring, afraid. When Vince emerged from the back and approached Tommy near the dish station, Keanu leaned forward to listen. These tables need to be cleared. Now. Tommy, what the hell are you doing? Tommy's voice was soft and deferential. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir. I don't care what you were doing. Vince stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. I said, now. Or do I need to remind you how lucky you are to even have this job? How many other places would hire someone with your history? The word history was loaded with meaning, with threat, with power. Tommy paled visibly. No, sir. I understand, sir. Good. Because one phone call from me, and you're back where you came from. Remember that. Tommy hurried away, his hands shaking as he gathered dirty dishes. Keanu's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. When their food arrived, carried expertly by Grace despite the weight of the loaded tray, Keanu watched as Lily struggled with her fork. Her right hand trembled, the neurological damage making fine motor control difficult. The fork slipped from her grip once, twice, 3 times. Each failure seemed to shrink her further into herself. A forkful of mac and cheese slid off before reaching her mouth, splattering on the table. Lily's face crumpled with frustration and shame. Her eyes began to glisten with unshaped tears. Keanu reached for her, wanting to help, wanting to fix it, wanting to do something. But before he could move, Grace was there. She pulled up a chair beside Lily's wheelchair and sat down, not hovering over her, not looming above her, but right there, beside her. You know what? Grace said conversationally, as if they were old friends catching up. When I was in medical school, I learned something really interesting about our brains. Lily looked up, startled by the matter of fact tone. Our brains are like supercomputers. Grace continued, picking up the fallen fork and cleaning it with her napkin. They send signals to our muscles, telling them what to do. Move this finger. Grip this object. Lift this fork. She demonstrated her own hand moving in slow motion. But sometimes, after something hard happens, those signals get a little confused. They want to reach your hand. They really do. But the path they usually take isn't working quite right. Lily was listening now. Really listening. So what does the brain do? Does it give up? She shook her head. No way. The brain is stubborn. The brain is determined. The brain says, okay, if that path doesn't work, I'll find a new path. I'll build a new road. And that's exactly what it does. Grace gently adjusted Lily's grip on the fork, showing her a different way to hold it that used different muscle groups. Your brain is working perfectly, Lily. It's just building new roads. And sometimes that takes a little extra time. But the signals will get there. I promise. She guided Lily's hand, helping her capture a bite of mac and cheese successfully. See, new road, new path, same destination. Lily stared at her fork, then at Grace. You were a doctor? Almost. Grace's voice held a note of old pain, quickly masked. I was studying to become a pediatrician, a doctor for kids. Why did you stop? Something flickered across Grace's face, a shadow of grief that she pushed down with practiced ease. My mom got sick and needed me to take care of her. Sometimes life asks us to make different choices than we planned. She guided Lily through another successful bite, then loosened her support, letting Lily try the modified grip herself. But you know what? The things I learned in medical school, they're still useful. Like knowing about brain pathways, like understanding that healing takes time, but it does happen. Lily managed the fork on her own. A small bite, carefully raised, successfully delivered. Her eyes widened. I did it. You did it. Grace's smile was radiant. You're building new roads, Lily. And pretty soon, you're going to have a whole highway system in there. Lily almost smiled. Almost. It was the closest thing to joy Keanu had seen on her face in over a year. I had an accident, Lily said suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. That's why I can't walk very well. That's why my hand shakes. I figured something like that, Grace replied gently. But you know what I see when I look at you? Lily shook her head. I see a girl who's still here, Who's still fighting? Who's still trying, even when it's hard? Grace reached out and touched Lily's hand. That makes you incredibly brave, Lily. Braver than you know? For a long moment, Lily just looked at her. Then she spoke the words that shattered what remained of Keanu's composure. My mom used to make mac and cheese on Fridays. She called it Friday Cheese Day. Kanu's throat closed up. Lily never talked about Sarah. Never. Not to the therapists. Not to the counselors. Not even to him. This was the first time she had voluntarily mentioned her mother since the accident. Grace seemed to understand the magnitude of the moment. That sounds like a wonderful tradition, she said softly. Your mom must have been a very special person. She was. Lily's voice was barely audible now. She was the best mom in the whole world. And my daddy was the best daddy. And now they're gone and I'm still here, and I don't know why. The words were a dam breaking. 14 months of silence, flooding out all at once. I don't know why I didn't die too. Everyone says I'm lucky, but I don't feel lucky. I feel alone. I feel broken. I feel like a part of me went away with them, and I can't get it back. Tears were streaming down her face now. Real tears. The first tears Keanu had seen her shed since the funeral. Grace did not shush her. Did not tell her everything would be okay. Did not offer empty platitudes or uncomfortable comfort. She simply listened. And when Lily finished, Grace took both of her small hands in her own. Do you want to know what I believe, Lily? Really, truly believe with my whole heart. Lily nodded, tears still falling. I believe that the people we love never really leave us. They're not gone. They're just somewhere else. Somewhere we can't see yet, but they're still watching, still loving us, still proud of us. She squeezed Lily's hands. And I believe that the love they gave us doesn't disappear when they go away. It stays right here. Grace touched her own chest, over her heart. It becomes part of who we are. And every time we remember them, every time we think about Friday Cheese Day or butterfly necklaces or the way your mom laughed, that love grows. Stronger, not weaker. Lily was sobbing now, but they were good tears. Healing tears. Necessary tears. You're not broken, Lily. You're grieving. And grieving is hard and painful and terrible. But it's not the same as being broken. Broken means something can never be fixed. But grief. Grief just means you loved someone so much that losing them left a hole in your heart. Grace smiled through her own glistening eyes. And the only cure for that kind of hole is time and kindness and people who understand. And maybe, sometimes, a really good plate of mac and cheese on Friday. Lily looked at Grace for a long moment. Then, without warning, she reached out and wrapped her arms around Grace's neck. A hug. The first hug Lily had initiated with anyone since the accident. The wall had not just cracked. It had crumbled. The moment was shattered by a harsh voice cutting through the restaurant. Grace, Table 12 has been waiting for their check for 10 minutes. Stop wasting time and do your job. Vincent Hartley stood near the kitchen, his arms crossed, his face twisted with barely concealed contempt. Grace straightened quickly, wiping her eyes. I was just helping. I don't care what you were doing. Move. Now? She squeezed Lily's hand once, a promise and a goodbye. I'll be right back, okay? Then she hurried away, her shoulders already tensing as she passed Vince. Keanu watched the manager's eyes follow Grace with something ugly in them. Something cruel, something that would need to be addressed. But first, he looked at Lily. She was still crying, but softly now, quietly. Her hand was pressed against her chest, over her heart, where Grace had said love lived. Daddy, she whispered. That word again. The word she had not used for 14 months. The word she had finally started using again, just days ago. Yes, sweetheart. Can we come back tomorrow? I want to see Grace again. Keanu's voice was thick with emotion. Of course we can. We can come back as many times as you want. Lily nodded, wiping her tears. Then she picked up her fork with the modified grip Grace had shown her. And she took another bite of mac and cheese all by herself. After dessert, which Lily actually ate instead of just pushing around her plate. Keanu asked for the check. Grace brought it with a small gift bag containing crayons, a Kim's Kitchen coloring sheet, and a small notebook with a butterfly on the cover. "This is my observation journal," she told Lily. "When I was training to be a doctor, I wrote down interesting things I noticed about the world. Patterns in clouds, colors in puddles, the way different people smiled." She pressed the notebook into Lily's hands. "I thought maybe you might like to start your own. You seem like someone who notices things other people miss." Lily clutched the notebook like a treasure. "Really? For me?" "For you, because I think you're going to notice amazing things, Lily Thompson. And I think those things are going to matter." As they prepared to leave, Keanu placed his credit card on the table. Grace ran it and returned with the receipt. Tucked beneath it was a $40 tip in cash that Keanu had hidden under his coffee cup. Grace's eyes widened when she found it. "Sir, this is too much. The bill was only—" "It's exactly right," Keanu said firmly. "For everything." Grace looked like she might cry again. "Thank you. You have no idea. Thank you." He knew exactly what that money meant to her, and he knew exactly where the rest of her tips were going. As Keanu helped Lily into the truck, the little girl spoke again. "Grace is special, Daddy. She understands. She is special." Keanu agreed. "Very special." He glanced back at the restaurant. Through the window, he could see Grace being berated by Vince again. Her head was bowed. Her shoulders were slumped. The confidence she had shown with Lily was gone, replaced by something small and afraid. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart? Can you help her? The way you helped me?" Keanu started the truck, his jaw set with determination. "I'm going to try, Lily. I promise you, I'm going to try." The next morning, Keanu made 2 phone calls. The first was to Rebecca Harrison, head of internal investigations for Kim's Kitchen Corporate. "I need you to drop everything and fly to Austin tonight. Bring forensic accountants and a corporate lawyer. What's happening? I'll explain when you arrive." "But it's bad, Rebecca. Worse than we suspected." The second call was to his personal assistant in Los Angeles. "I need everything you can find on Vincent Hartley, manager of Kim's Kitchen Austin, and his family. Employment history, financial records, any connections to other employees." "How soon?" "Yesterday." While waiting for his team, Keanu returned to the restaurant for lunch. Same disguise, same corner booth, same careful observation. But this time, he came alone. Lily was back at the hotel with a private nurse, working on her physical therapy exercises. She had been reluctant to let him leave, but he had promised to bring back a full report on Grace. "Tell her I'm practicing my new grip," Lily had said. "Tell her I haven't dropped my fork once today." Keanu requested Grace's section specifically, claiming she had served him well the night before. Brittany rolled her eyes but complied. When Grace approached, her face showed recognition but maintained professional distance. "Welcome back. Your daughter isn't with you today?" "She's resting at the hotel. But she wanted me to thank you again for last night." Keanu kept his voice warm. "You have an extraordinary gift with children." Grace's smile was tinged with old sadness. "I used to want to work with children professionally. Spent 4 years preparing for it. But life had other plans. Medical school, you mentioned." She nodded, pouring his coffee. "Monroe Medical. 2nd year. Pediatric neurology focus." "That's impressive. What happened?" The question was gentle but direct. Grace's hand paused for just a moment. "My father died when I was 18. Heart attack, completely unexpected. My mother never recovered. Then, about 3 years ago, she was diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis." She set the coffee pot down. "I had a choice. Finish school and leave her to struggle alone, or come home and take care of her." Grace shrugged. "It wasn't really a choice at all. I'm sorry." "Don't be. She's my mother. She raised me alone after my father died, working 2 jobs to pay for my education. The least I can do is take care of her now." Keanu studied her face. "The manager here seems pretty intense." Grace's expression shuddered. Mr. Hartley runs a tight ship. Tight ship, or slave ship? The question was more direct than he had intended. Grace glanced toward the office, where Vince was visible through the window. I should get your order, sir. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry. It's fine. But her voice was tight now, the warmth diminished. I need this job. I can't afford to. She trailed off. I understand, Keanu said gently. And I admire what you're doing for your mother, for your family. Grace nodded, composure restored. What can I get you for lunch? Throughout his meal, Keanu watched the operation with even more careful attention than the night before. He saw Derek pocket cash from a table Grace had served, right in front of a customer who was too engrossed in their phone to notice. He watched Vince berate Martha for taking a 3-minute bathroom break during her 8-hour shift, calling her replaceable. Within earshot of customers, he observed Tommy being cornered again near the supply closet, Vince's words too quiet to hear, but his threatening posture unmistakable. He saw the schedule posted on the bulletin board in the back hallway when he walked past to use the restroom. Grace was listed for 6 double shifts. Derek and Brittany had 3 short shifts each. Around 2 o'clock, an elderly woman entered the restaurant. She moved slowly with a wooden cane, her white hair perfectly styled in a way that suggested she had once been quite glamorous. Her clothes were simple but well maintained, her posture straight despite her years. The staff called her Betty, and from the way Grace's face lit up, this was clearly a beloved regular. Betty! Your usual table? You know it, sweetheart. Betty's voice was strong and sharp despite her age. And I want the full report. What's happening with your life? You haven't told me anything good in weeks. Grace helped Betty to a corner booth, chatting easily. Keanu listened carefully. I'm fine, Betty. Just busy. Busy is code for exhausted. Betty fixed Grace with a piercing stare. You've lost weight. Subscribe, you've got circles under your eyes that would give a raccoon competition. And don't think I haven't noticed you favoring your left foot. Those shoes are falling apart, aren't they? Grace laughed, but it was a tired sound. They're fine. They're held together with tape and prayers. Betty reached across the table and took Grace's hand. Sweetheart, let me help. I have more money than I know what to do with, and no one to spend it on. Betty, we've talked about this. We have. And you're still too proud to accept help from an old woman who loves you like a granddaughter. Betty shook her head. Your mother would scold you, you know. Margaret Sullivan raised you better than this stubborn pride. My mother raised me to earn my own way. She raised you to be kind and strong. She never raised you to be a martyr. Grace squeezed Betty's hand. I'm okay. Really. Things will get better. But she didn't sound like she believed it. Keanu watched Betty leave a $35 tip on a $12 meal. And he watched Derek swoop in the moment Grace turned her back, taking the cash to the register, pocketing most of it, leaving just $5 behind. Grace returned to find the diminished tip. Her shoulders sagged for just a second before she straightened and returned to work. Betty had noticed the theft from her booth. She was watching with sharp eyes and a tight expression. And from the look on her face, this was far from the first time she had witnessed such a thing. When Grace brought Keanu's check, Betty intercepted him in the parking lot. You're not just some customer, are you, young man? Keanu studied the elderly woman. What makes you say that? 70. 8 years on this earth, 40 of them as a nurse in a county hospital. I've seen every kind of person there is, and I've learned to read them. Betty's eyes were sharp as razors. You watch too carefully. You ask the right questions. And you look at that poor girl Grace like you're trying to solve a puzzle. She stepped closer, her cane tapping on the asphalt. Whoever you are, whatever you're doing here, please help them. That manager is a snake who's been stealing from these workers for over a year. Good people are suffering, and nobody with any power is doing a damn thing about it. Why haven't they reported it to corporate? Betty laughed bitterly. To who? The regional manager is Vince's nephew's father, in-law's cousin, or some such nonsense. Complaints go into a black hole. The ones who speak up get their hours cut to nothing or their schedules made impossible until they quit. She shook her head. Grace hasn't had a day off in 8 months. Her mother is dying slowly, needing medication that costs more than Grace makes in a week even when she isn't being robbed. And that thief Vince takes half her tips while his useless son and that vapid girl Brittany split the rest. Tell me everything, Keanu said quietly. Everything you've seen. For 45 minutes, Betty talked. She told him about the tip theft in detail. Cash skimmed from tables. Credit card tips rerouted to Derek's employee number. Tips mysteriously disappearing from the pool before distribution. She told him about the schedule manipulation. How Grace, Martha, and Tommy were always assigned to the worst sections and the most grueling hours. How Derek and Brittany got prime shifts with minimal effort. She told him about the intimidation. How Vince threatened Tommy with his past. How he mocked Martha's age and failing eyesight. How he punished Grace for asking questions about policies by assigning her to double shifts that left her barely functional. That girl should be saving lives. Betty finished, her voice cracking. She was going to be a pediatric neurologist, for God's sake, top 10% of her class. Her professors called her the most promising student they'd seen in years. She wiped her eyes angrily. But she works 16-hour days serving coffee and cleaning up after people who don't even see her as human. And half of what she earns disappears into that monster's pocket while she can't even afford her mother's medication. Keanu's hands were trembling. Not with fear, with fury. Betty, I need you to do something for me. Anything. Come to this restaurant Friday morning at 9 o'clock. Sit in your usual booth and watch. Betty's eyes narrowed with understanding. Something's going to happen. Something's going to change. That evening, Rebecca Harrison arrived at Keanu's hotel with a team of 4 specialists, 2 forensic accountants, 1 employment lawyer, 1 corporate investigator. They spread documents across the conference room table, laptops open, evidence organized in damning rows. It's worse than we suspected, Rebecca said grimly, pointing to highlighted discrepancies on her screen. Vincent Hartley has been systematically stealing from employees for at least 18 months, and he's been clever about it. She pulled up a spreadsheet. He created what he calls an auxiliary server classification in the scheduling system. When employees are logged as auxiliary, their digital tips automatically reroute to whoever is designated as the primary POS operator for that shift. Let me guess, Keanu said. Derek Hartley? His son. Hired 10 months ago, directly by Vince, with falsified references. Rebecca clicked to another screen. Derek is listed as primary operator on 73% of all shifts. The remaining shifts go to Brittany Collins, who happens to be dating Derek. Total amount stolen. The forensic accountant spoke up. $62,437 in digital tips alone. Cash is harder to trace, but based on customer receipt patterns and tip averages, we estimate another $15,000 to $20,000 in cash skimming, and nearly $80,000 stolen from people who could barely afford to survive. There's more, Rebecca continued. Inventory records have been manipulated to cover up theft of supplies. Time cards have been falsified to deny overtime pay, and Vince has been using company resources for personal benefit. She pulled up another document. Has also been systematically targeting specific employees for harassment. The pattern is clear. Anyone who questions his methods gets punished until they quit or learn to stay silent. The employment lawyer cleared her throat. We found evidence of illegal coercion regarding Tommy Rodriguez. He was hired through your Second Chance program 3 years ago. Clean record ever since. Model employee. But Vince discovered his past and has been using it as leverage. The investigator added. Multiple witnesses report toward hearing Vince threaten to make a phone call that would send Tommy back where he came from. That's potentially criminal intimidation. Key thought of the young man flinching every time Vince looked at him. What about Grace Sullivan? Rebecca pulled up a personnel file. This one is particularly tragic. Grace was in her second year at Monroe Medical School. Top 10% of her class, specializing in pediatric neurology. Her professors described her as exceptional. One called her the most naturally gifted student he'd seen in 30 years of teaching. She slid the file across the table. She withdrew 3 years ago when her mother was diagnosed with advanced multiple sclerosis. Her father had died 5 years earlier, leaving debts. There was no one else to provide care. Keanu opened the file and saw Grace's medical school transcript. All A's. Glowing recommendations. A future that had been stolen by circumstance. Her mother's medication costs $800 a month. Rebecca continued. Insurance covers less than half. Grace works double shifts 6 days a week and still falls behind because of the tip theft. She should be earning nearly twice what she actually receives. The accountant added. Vince has specifically targeted her because she asked questions about the tip policy early on. He's been punishing her ever since. Keanu stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Austin skyline. What about her medical school status? She's technically still eligible to return. Her advisor, Dr. Rebecca Mitchell, has been trying to reach her about a scholarship opportunity. Full tuition and living stipend. But Grace hasn't responded to any emails in months. Why not? The investigator spoke quietly. Because she's given up hope. When you're drowning, you stop looking at the sky. Keanu turned back to face his team. Friday morning, I want to confront this personally. In public. In front of every employee and customer. That's unusual, Rebecca said carefully. Most corporate actions are handled privately to avoid liability. I don't care about liability. I care about justice. I care about making sure everyone sees what happens when you abuse your power. He paused. And I care about showing those employees that someone is finally listening. Rebecca nodded slowly. What about the affected employees? Restitution, full repayment of everything stolen, plus damages. And I want options prepared for each of them. Career development, healthcare support, whatever they need. And Grace Sullivan specifically. Keanu thought of his sister Kim. Of her wish for places where people could feel human. Of Grace kneeling beside Lily's wheelchair, treating her with dignity and compassion when everyone else looked away. Of a young woman who should be healing children instead of having her life stolen by a petty thief in a manager's uniform. Every option, he said. Whatever it takes to give her back the future that was taken from her. Medical school, her mother's care, everything, that could be significant investment. I don't care about the cost. I care about doing what's right. He walked back to the table. My sister made me promise to create places where people are treated with dignity. She's been gone for 20 years, and I'm still trying to keep that promise. What's happening at that restaurant is a betrayal of everything Kim's Kitchen is supposed to stand for. His voice hardened. Friday morning, that betrayal ends. A Friday morning arrived with clear blue skies and brilliant Texas sunshine. At precisely 8:45, 3 black SUVs pulled into the parking lot of Kim's Kitchen number 23. The breakfast rush was reaching its peak. Inside the restaurant, Grace had been on her feet since 6 a.m., covering yet another opening shift that Vince had added to her already crushing schedule. Her body ached. Her feet screamed. Her heart ached more than either. The pharmacy had called yesterday. Her mother's medication was ready for pickup. $843. Grace had exactly $217 in her bank account. She had cried in the parking lot for 15 minutes before her shift started. Then she had dried her tears, straightened her worn uniform, and walked inside to do her job. Because she had no other choice. Because her mother was counting on her. because giving up was not something Grace Sullivan knew how to do. When the front doors opened and the corporate team entered, Grace assumed it was a routine health inspection. Then she saw who was with them. The man from the corner booth. The one with the kind eyes who listened when she talked about brain pathways. The one whose daughter had hugged her and cried in her arms. But he was transformed. Gone was the trucker cap and flannel shirt. Gone was the working, class disguise that had seemed so authentic. In their place was an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Grace made in a year. And his face, now fully visible, without the cap. Grace's coffee pot slipped from nerveless fingers and shattered on the floor. She knew that face. Everyone knew that face. Every magazine cover, every movie premiere, every late-night talk show. That was Keanu Reeves. That was the owner of Kim's Kitchen. What the hell is going on here? Vincent Hartley emerged from his office, his confident stride faltering as recognition crashed over him like a wave. Mr. Reeves, we weren't expecting. Clearly, Keanu's voice was ice and steel. You weren't expecting me at all, were you, Vince? The corporate team spread throughout the restaurant with practiced efficiency, blocking exits, taking positions, recording everything. Customers fell silent, forks frozen halfway to mouths. The morning conversations died away, replaced by the electric tension of something unprecedented unfolding. Betty Harper, seated in her usual booth as instructed, allowed herself a grim smile of satisfaction. Ladies and gentlemen, Keanu addressed the room, his voice carrying clearly to every corner. I apologize for the interruption to your breakfast. I am Keanu Reeves, the owner of Kim's Kitchen restaurants. A gasps rippled through the crowd. We are conducting an emergency corporate review of this location. Your meals today are complimentary with our sincere thanks for your patience. Rebecca began distributing vouchers. Vince attempted to regain his composure, his smile stretched thin over naked fear. Mr. Reeves, this is quite a surprise. If I'd had any idea you were coming, I certainly would have. What? Keanu cut him off. Hidden the evidence of your theft. Adjusted the tip distributions to look legitimate. Coached your son and his girlfriend on their stories. Warned Tommy Rodriguez not to say anything about your threats. Each accusation landed like a hammer blow. The color drained from Vince's face. I don't know what you've been told, but I can assure you. You can assure me of nothing. Keanu stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Because I have seen everything with my own eyes. He pulled a leather portfolio from Rebecca's hands. For the past 18 months, this location has operated in direct violation of everything Kim's Kitchen stands for. Everything I built this company to represent. Everything my sister asked me to create before she died. The mention of his sister caught everyone's attention. Vincent Hartley, you have systematically stolen over $62,000 in employee tips through manipulation of our point-of-sale system. You have falsified inventory reports and time cards. You have used your position to harass, intimidate, and threaten your own staff. Keanu's voice grew harder with each word. You have targeted the most vulnerable people in your employ. A woman caring for her dying mother. A widow working to support herself. A young man trying to rebuild his life after making mistakes. He turned to look at Grace, Martha, Tommy, each in turn. You stole from people who had nothing left to give. And you did it because you thought no one was watching. Because you thought no one cared. Because you thought you were untouchable. He turned back to Vince. You were wrong. Vince's composure shattered. This is ridiculous! These people are lying to you. They're disgruntled, ungrateful. Ungrateful. Keanu's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. Ungrateful for being robbed. Ungrateful for being threatened. Ungrateful for working 16-hour days and still not being able to afford medication for a dying parent. He stepped even closer. Or perhaps you mean ungrateful, like my daughter, whom you called a crippled kid when you thought no one important was listening. The restaurant went completely silent. Yes, Vince, The little girl in the wheelchair. The one Grace spent her time wasting on, according to you. That's my daughter, the child I adopted after her parents died in a car accident. Vince's face went gray. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. You didn't care. Because to you, a child in a wheelchair is just an inconvenience. A problem. Something to mock and dismiss because she can't fight back. Keanu's eyes were blazing now. But that's exactly who Kim's Kitchen was created to protect. The vulnerable. The forgotten. The people the world tries to make invisible. He turned to address the gathered employees. My sister Kim died of cancer when she was 23 years old. In her final months, a waitress at a small diner treated her with kindness and dignity when the rest of the world looked away. That waitress reminded me that every person deserves to be seen, to be valued, to be treated as human. His voice softened. Kim made me promise to create places where people like her would feel welcome, where the sick and the struggling and the forgotten could find compassion instead of contempt. He turned back to Vince, and his voice hardened again. You have made a mockery of that promise, and now you will face the consequences. He nodded to Rebecca. As of this moment, Vincent Hartley and Derek Hartley are terminated from Kim's Kitchen for cause. Criminal charges will be filed for theft, fraud, and coercion. Police officers are waiting outside to take them into custody. Two on cue, two uniformed officers entered through the front door. Derek, who had been slowly edging toward the back exit, froze. No! Vince snarled, his face twisting with rage. You can't do this. I have connections. I'll sue. I'll destroy you. You have nothing? Keanu replied calmly. And you are nothing. You are a small, petty man who abused his power over people who couldn't fight back. And now everyone sees you for exactly what you are. As the officers approached with handcuffs, Vince lunged toward Keanu. This is your fault, he screamed. You should have been here. You should have been watching. You left us alone and now you blame me. The officers restrained him easily, but Vince continued to struggle. It's always the same with rich people like you. You create these feel-good companies and then disappear to your mansions while the rest of us do the actual work. And when something goes wrong, you swoop in like some hero. The only thing that went wrong, Keanu interrupted quietly, is that I trusted you. I believed you when you said you shared my vision, and I was wrong. He watched as Vince was handcuffed. But I'm not wrong about what matters. I'm not wrong about treating people with dignity. And I'm not wrong about holding you accountable for what you've done. Derek was cuffed next, his bravado crumbling into tears. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't want to. You made me. Save it for your lawyer, the officer said, guiding him toward the door. As father and son were led out of the restaurant, the silence held for a long moment. Then Betty Harper rose slowly from her booth. Her weathered hands came together in a single, deliberate clap. Another clap. Another. And then the entire restaurant erupted. Staff and customers alike, applauding, cheering, some crying. Martha collapsed into a chair, her face in her hands, sobbing with relief. Tommy slid down the wall, his expression one of pure disbelief. And Grace stood amid the broken glass and spilled coffee, trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks. Keanu approached her slowly. I'm sorry for the deception, he said gently. I needed to see the truth without anyone knowing who I was. Grace shook her head, struggling to find words. You were the customer, in the booth, with Lily. Wes! All this time. You were watching. Wes! Grace looked at the shattered coffee pot at her feet. I broke another one. Vince used to dock my pay for that. No one will ever dock your pay again. Not here. Not anywhere. Keanu paused. We need to talk about your future, Grace, when you're ready. But right now, I think you should sit down before you fall down. He guided her to a booth, and someone brought her water. Betty appeared beside them, her eyes bright with tears. I knew it, she said to Keanu. I knew you weren't just some customer. I've been praying for someone to help these kids for years. Your prayers were heard. Betty. Keanu smiled at her. And your testimony will be valuable when this goes to court. I'll testify until my voice gives out, Betty declared. That man deserves everything that's coming to him. 3 weeks later, Grace sat in a conference room at the Reeves Foundation headquarters in downtown Austin. Across from her sat Keanu and Rebecca Harrison. Lily was there too, no longer in her wheelchair, but seated in a regular chair, her legs swinging slightly as she colored in the observation notebook Grace had given her. The change in the little girl was remarkable. She spoke freely now, laughed often, and had even started asking questions again about the universe and animals, and whether butterflies remembered being caterpillars. I still don't understand why I'm here, Grace said nervously, clutching the cup of tea someone had brought her. I'm just a waitress. You were never just a waitress. Keanu slid a folder across the polished table. You were a medical student on track to become an exceptional pediatric neurologist. Life intervened, but that doesn't erase who you are or what you're capable of. Grace opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a check. Her eyes went wide. This is more money than I make in 2 years. That's the restitution for 18 months of stolen tips and wages, plus damages for emotional distress. Every affected employee received similar compensation based on our calculations of what was taken from them. Grace stared at the number, trying to make it real. But there's more. Keanu continued. I've spoken with Dr. Rebecca Mitchell at Monroe Medical School. The scholarship she tried to contact you about is still available. Full tuition, comprehensive living stipend, and flexible scheduling to accommodate family obligations. I can't go back to school, Grace said automatically. My mother needs full-time care. I can't leave her alone. Keanu slid another document across the table. The Reeves Foundation maintains several fully accessible apartments for individuals with medical needs. One has been reserved in your mother's name, in the same building as Lily and me, actually. It includes 24-hour home healthcare coverage through our corporate insurance program. Grace's hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. Why? Her voice cracked. Why would you do all of this for me? We barely know each other. Keanu glanced at Lily, who had stopped coloring and was watching intently. Do you want to tell her, sweetheart? Lily nodded solemnly. Because you saw me, she said simply. Everyone else looked at my wheelchair and saw a problem, a broken thing. But you saw me. You talked to me like I was a real person. You helped me eat my mac and cheese without making me feel stupid. You told me about brain pathways and butterflies and how love doesn't disappear when people die. Her eyes were bright with emotion. You made me feel like I was still here, like I still mattered. And that's when I started being able to talk again. Grace wiped tears from her cheeks. Oh, Lily, my daddy says that what you did for me is what his sister wanted. Places where people feel human. People who make other people feel seen. Lily smiled. You're one of those people, Grace, and Daddy wants to help you the way you helped me. Keanu cleared his throat, clearly moved. 20 years ago, my sister was dying. A waitress named Rose treated her with kindness when the rest of the world looked away. Rose reminded me that every person deserves dignity, regardless of their circumstances. He leaned forward. You did the same thing for my daughter. In 15 minutes, you accomplished what 14 months of expensive therapy couldn't. You reached her. You saw her as a person, not a problem. You gave me back my little girl. Grace looked at the document spread before her. The check that would pay off her mother's medical debt. The scholarship that would resurrect her dreams. The apartment that would give her mother proper care. The future she had stopped believing was possible. This is too much, she whispered. I don't deserve. Stop. Keanu's voice was gentle but firm. You deserve every bit of this and more. You sacrificed your future to care for your mother. You worked impossible hours while being robbed and mistreated. You never complained, never gave up, Never stop treating every customer with kindness even when the world gave you nothing but hardship in return. He smiled. You deserve to be a doctor, Grace. You deserve to save children's lives. And you deserve to have someone fight for you the way you fight for everyone else. Grace looked at Lily, at Keanu, at the impossible gift being offered. If I accept this, she said slowly, it has to be because I've earned it. Not because I'm some charity case. Not because you feel obligated. You've more than earned it. Your grades, your recommendations, your natural gifts. They earned you a place at that medical school years ago. Life interrupted. I'm just removing the obstacles that were put in your way. And my mother's care can't be dependent on any relationship with your family. If things change, if circumstances shift, the arrangements for your mother stand regardless. Keanu confirmed. They're not contingent on anything. Though Lily would be very disappointed if you stopped visiting. Very, very disappointed, Lily added emphatically. I need someone to explain more brain stuff to me. And Daddy doesn't know anything about butterflies. Grace laughed through her tears. For the first time in 3 years, she felt something she had forgotten existed. Hope, okay? She whispered. Yes, to all of it. The legal proceedings against Vincent and Derek Hartley were swift and merciless. The evidence was overwhelming. Transaction records showing 18 months of systematic theft. Falsified schedules and time cards. Recorded conversations of harassment and intimidation. And testimony from 31 current and former employees who finally felt safe enough to speak. Vincent Hartley was sentenced to 4 years in state prison for theft, fraud, and criminal coercion. Derek Hartley received 2 years probation, 400 hours of community service, and a permanent criminal record that would follow him forever. Brittany Collins was fired and charged as an accessory, receiving probation and community service of her own. The story made national headlines. Hollywood star goes undercover to expose restaurant corruption. Keanu Reeves catches tip. Stealing manager red-handed. How one act of kindness changed everything. But it was the smaller stories that mattered most to Keanu. Tommy Rodriguez was promoted to shift supervisor, his past finally and permanently behind him. The second chance program that had given him a job now gave him a future, and he enrolled in community college to study business management. Martha Jenkins received full restitution and a raise that allowed her to help her granddaughter finish nursing school. She was named assistant manager of the Austin location, her 15 years of experience finally recognized and rewarded. Betty Harper was designated official community ambassador for Kim's Kitchen, with free meals for life and a standing invitation to every company event. She took the role seriously, visiting weekly to ensure the new management maintained proper standards. And Grace Sullivan returned to Monroe Medical School. 1 year later, Keanu stood in the audience at the Kim's Kitchen Community Center grand opening in Austin. The facility was his most ambitious project yet. A combination restaurant, job training center, and family support services hub designed to help people facing difficult circumstances. The building was named the Kim Reeves Memorial Center. On stage, preparing to give the dedication speech, stood Grace. She was transformed from the exhausted waitress he had met 1 year ago. Confident, rested, alive. Her white medical school coat bore her name embroidered above the Monroe emblem. Her hair was professionally styled. Her eyes sparkled with purpose instead of despair. Beside Keanu sat Lily, no longer in any kind of wheelchair or mobility device. Months of intensive physical therapy, supported by Grace's medical knowledge and unwavering encouragement, had helped her progress from wheelchair to walker to crutches and finally to independent walking. She still had challenging days. Her right hand still trembled sometimes when she was tired, but she was walking. She was talking. She was laughing. She was live, in a way she hadn't been since the accident. My name is Grace Sullivan, the young woman began, her voice carrying clearly through the crowded room. 1 year ago, I was drowning. I had given up on my dreams, my future, and honestly, myself. I was convinced that mere survival was the best I could ever hope for. She paused, gathering herself. Then a man in a trucker cap and flannel shirt walked into my restaurant with a little girl in a wheelchair. And everything changed. She looked at Keanu. He saw something in me that I had forgotten existed. He didn't just give me back my future. He reminded me of a truth I had lost somewhere along the way, that every single person deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their circumstances. She turned to address the audience directly. This center will serve thousands of people in the years to come. Some will need job training. Some will need healthcare assistance. Some will just need a hot meal and someone willing to listen. Her voice grew stronger, and every single one of them will be treated as what they are, human beings worthy of respect. Not problems to be solved. Not statistics to be counted. Human beings with stories and dreams and struggles that deserve to be acknowledged. She smiled. That's what Keanu Reeves wanted when she made her brother promise to create places where people could feel human. And that's what we're going to deliver. Every single day. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, Grace found Keanu in the crowd. Lily ran to her, arms outstretched. "Grace, did you see me walk all the way from my seat? I didn't even wobble!" Grace swept her up in a hug. "I saw you, superstar. You were amazing. Those brain pathways of yours are working overtime." Lily beamed. "Daddy, can Grace come to Sunday dinner tomorrow? She promised to teach me about how memories work in our brains." Keanu smiled. Sunday dinners had become a sacred tradition. Grace, her mother Margaret, Lily, and Keanu. Sometimes Martha joined them with her granddaughter. Sometimes Betty came with stories and laughter. Sometimes Tommy brought desserts from the culinary classes he was taking. They had become a family, not by blood, but by choice, by love, by the bonds forged in kindness and strengthened through hardship. "I think that can be arranged," Keanu said. Grace set Lily down and turned to face him. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything, for believing in me when I had stopped believing in myself." "Thank you," Keanu replied, "for giving me back my daughter, for proving that kindness still matters in this world." As the crowd dispersed around them, Keanu noticed the framed photograph that had been mounted at the entrance of the new community center. His sister Kim, 23 years old, smiling despite everything she was facing. The colorful scarf around her head, the sparkle still in her eyes. Beneath the photo were the words, "In loving memory of Keanu Reeves, who taught us that kindness costs nothing but means everything." Keanu touched the frame gently. "I kept my promise," he whispered. "I'm still keeping it." From across the room, Lily's voice rang out. "Daddy! Grace says the mac and cheese here is even better than the restaurants. Come try it!" Keanu smiled. Some dreams ended before their time. Some futures were stolen by circumstance. But other dreams were reborn, stronger and more beautiful than before. And sometimes, the future you deserved found you when you least expected it. All you had to do was keep your heart open. And treat every person you met as if they mattered. Because they did. They always did. Every single one. Thank you for following this story. Let us know in the comments below. If this story has moved you and you'd like to stand with us in bringing more voices of truth and hope to light, please consider supporting our work. Even the smallest gift helps us continue creating and sharing these powerful stories. You can find the donate link in the description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter we're preparing for you!